and welcome to Analysis with me, John Rees. The Sri Lankan government has extended curfews in the south of the country as communal violence between Buddhists and Muslims intensifies. Attacks on Muslims by Buddhist hardliners have left 4 dead and nearly 80 people injured. The most recent attack is the latest in a series of anti-Muslim demonstrations that form part of a systematic campaign by monks from Sri Lankan's Sinhalese Buddhist nationalist organisation Bodhu Bala Sena. Against Sri Lankan Muslims, the attacks have led to heavy criticism of the government, who allowed militant Buddhists to gather in this flashpoint region. But how widespread is the violence, and could Sri Lanka be in danger of slipping into another civil war? Well, joining me to discuss this are Dr. Mustafa Reyes, President of the Sri Lankan Islamic Forum UK, and Dr. Lukman Harries, author and President of the Association of Sri Lankan Muslims. And on the line we're joined by David Griffiths from Amnesty International and by Athas Sally, leader of the Muslim Tamil National Alliance and a former mayor of the Colombo Municipal Council. Welcome to you all, but before we start, let's take a look at this report.
In some of the worst violence seen in Sri Lanka since the end of the civil war, growing tensions between Muslim and hardline Buddhist groups turned into open clashes on the streets of Aruthgama and nearby Berruwela, traditionally coastal towns known for their tourism. Initial reports indicated that 3 Muslims were killed and up to 78 people were injured. Speaking after the attack, the government's Justice Minister, who is also the leader of the Sri Lankan Muslim National Congress, said that the violence appeared to have been part of a coordinated campaign.
Several mosques have been attacked, several business places have been destroyed. It has been a very planned incident, and this violence have spread despite the fact we have appealed to all the authorities to take sufficient action. There was enough prior warning about what was going to happen. Despite that, for an inflammatory and insightful meeting to have been allowed to take place under the very eyes of the law and order machinery is an outrageous thing as far as we are concerned.
The attacks came after an incendiary rally held by the hardline Bodhu Bala Sena, a Buddhist nationalist group that draws its support from the majority Sinhalese ethnic group. Following the rally, the BBS marched into the Muslim areas of Aruthgama, chanting anti-Muslim slogans, where police then reportedly used tear gas to quell the violence, as the BBS turned their attention to Muslim buildings and houses. Many local residents, however, say that the local police were involved in the violence.
The mosque was first attacked by the police. The shop next to it is mine, and that was also attacked first by the police. 90% of the destruction was by the police. Then people came and robbed the mosque and the shop.
Since the end of the civil war and the collapse of the rebel Tamil Tigers in 2009, there has been a growth in Sri Lanka of Sinhalese Buddhist revivalist groups, who subscribe to an ideology of Buddhist nationalism. During the civil war, the Muslim minority was often victim of attacks by the Tamil rebels, but they are now increasingly the focus of attacks and abuse by the BBS, who have run sustained campaigns in the country against Muslim practices. Many have criticised the government, in which Muslim leaders take part, for its inaction on the issue, who point out the many ties that exist between government officials and BBS members. The attack has sparked outrage from members of the Muslim community around the world. In London yesterday, Muslims of all nationalities came together to hold a demonstration outside of Downing Street in order to put pressure on the British government to condemn the violence and raise awareness of the situation.
So we have organized this peace protest to let the whole world know what's really going on in Sri Lanka at the moment. Because what happened last few days, and the innocent people innocent Muslim people have been killed, and the houses were torched and burned down, and people have misplaced. They're going through so many pains at the moment.
But with tensions between Muslim and Buddhist groups in Sri Lanka at an all-time high, there are growing concerns of open civil conflict in a country that has rarely seen peace in the last 30 years. Nathaniel Lema Sansom, Islam Channel.
So Mustafa, what is it that's behind this latest outbreak of violence?
Yes, you know what happened for the last 3 decades, there was the ethnic violence between the minority Tamils and the Sinhalese government was going on for the last 3 decades. So that problem was over in 2009.
With the crushing of the Tamils.
That's right. So since then we found emergence of a new group they call Bodhu Bala Sena. So what they were saying is a Buddhist force. So they find a new target to attack, that was Muslims. So in that that organization, Bodh Bala Sena, was spreading the hatred particularly among the young Sri Lankan Sinhalese people in their mind, using all the social network. They were spreading the rumors and the hatred and the racism, saying that the Muslims are growing in numbers and they're going to take up your positions, take up your jobs, take up your markets, take up your education and positions and everything. So that is how they are spreading these false ideas and poisoning the minds of young Sri Lankans. And this Bodh Bala Sena they are all out to attack Muslims. So they've been doing this for the last 2 years, and many community, the civil organizations in Sri Lanka, they have taken this very seriously, and they have taken this to the government authorities. But what we find was that there's no action has been taken. So on that particular day, there was a very high tension between the Muslims and the Buddhist the forces in the Aludgam, where the ethnic violence erupted. So that day, all the civil organizations appealed to the government, saying that not to allow this group to conduct a meeting which can erupt as an ethnic violence. So as suspected, they conducted the meeting, and this particular, the monk, in fact, he was hijacking the Buddhism. But the Buddhism is a phase of peace, but he was showing the phase of terror. And he hijacked the Buddhism, and he came out openly saying that, you kill the fellows, you loot them, and you burn them. It's open, it's there in the videos and everywhere. So that triggered the violence.
Okay. Let me bring in David Griffiths from Amnesty International. David, I mean, we've heard a lot of criticism of the government for allowing this to get out of hand. Is that your take on it?
Well, this was the most serious communal violence in Sri Lanka for years. But as you say, the fact that it shouldn't have been allowed to happen in the first place. The Bodh Bala Sena held a rally on Sunday in what was already a very tense situation. The reports that Amnesty International has received suggest that police were present but were just onlookers as the BBS speakers incited hatred and spoke very negatively of the Muslim community before leading a rally which ultimately led to the violence. So this should have been prevented from happening. It was pretty clear where this was going to lead. And so now the government has promised to launch an impartial investigation into the events in Alabama and subsequently, but it's really important that this inquiry is thoroughly impartial and that it yields results, by which I mean that the instigators and the perpetrators of this violence are brought to justice. The BBS, Bodh Bala Sena, came out of nowhere pretty much exactly 2 years ago in June 2012, and there have been strong allegations of connections with high-level government officials. Certainly the Bodh Bala Sena helps to strengthen Sinhala Buddhist nationalist sentiment, which, according to some political analyses, can to an extent serve the ends of the government in parts of the country. But it's important that this inquiry that has been promised is fully impartial. And as I say, that the perpetrators and the instigators of this violence are brought to justice.
Okay, so do we have any idea about how big this organisation is now? There's something like 500,000 Buddhist monks in Sri Lanka, but obviously this is a relatively small proportion of them. Have we any idea what proportion?
We don't have any information on what proportion of Buddhist monks belong to or sympathize with Bodhibala Sena. I would just say two things. First of all, BBS is not the only group of this nature in Sri Lanka, although it is the most visible, and it has been implicated extensively in violence against both Muslims and Christians over the past 2 years. But the second thing to say is that there is also a very strong movement against BBS from within the Sinhala Buddhist community in Sri Lanka. For example, last year, after the high-profile attacks on Muslim-owned businesses in Colombo, a group calling itself Buddhists Against Bodhibala Sena held a vigil outside the BBS offices, a candlelit vigil, which was met with a heavy-handed police response. Now, our understanding is that this group of Buddhists who are opposed to the violent extremist kinds of activities espoused by BBS is growing in influence, and it's important that their voices are heard and that Sri Lanka is not allowed to slip further into a situation of communal tension.
Lukman, we've heard that this group emerged very, very rapidly. What would you say are the conditions that have produced this? What's led to this sudden growth of this organisation?
Yeah, John. Now, if you want to understand why they came up, you need to go into a bit of history as well. Now, if you look at Buddhism that's being practiced in Sri Lanka, of course, that's what is called the Theravada Buddhism. But the analysts, they talk of what is called a Sinhala Buddhism. Sinhala Buddhism. The problem is the Sinhalese, more than the Tripitaka, their scripture, they go by what is called a historical chronicle, which is called the Mahavamsa, which they quote for various things as if it's the God's word. It's a very, very, it's authentic type of thing. Now, in terms of the Buddhism, vis-a-vis the Sinhalese people, they believe that the Mahavansa, according to Mahavansa, the Lord Buddha has vested the Sinhalese people with the responsibility of protecting Buddhism. And therefore, they think that it's a God-given right for them to ensure that the Buddhism is, protected at all costs. So in this, the ones that the Bodhibala Sena or the Sihalaravya, that the echo of Sinhala people, that's what it means, or the Ravana Balakaya, those three main hate groups, they actually consider that Mahavansa version of Buddhism as their, the ideology. And further, they have this role model who is called the Anagarika Dharmapala, who came, in 18th century, where he actually lobbied or, canvassed among the Sinhalese people to ensure that all the influences, which they call foreign influences, to be purged from what is called this one.
Okay. Let me bring in Azaz Sally now. Azaz, can you tell me what the kind of response has been among Muslims and what your evaluation of the government's response to this has been?
I couldn't follow you.
Could you tell me what you think the response among the Muslim community has been to this outbreak of violence?
Actually speaking, I think I was listening to all of your conversation. How this actually started this was on Thursday when it was a Poya day. A Buddhist monk was traveling towards Lanka town, and they found two young boys standing by the roadside, and the driver cut it on to them. They stopped the vehicle and told him, "Why are you doing this?" That's all that happened, and there was a small argument between the two boys and the driver. This led to the monk going and making a false complaint in the police that he was assaulted. This is where all the trouble started. And the police reacted so badly, took the side of the monk, and even went up to admitting the monk in the hospital also. And they demanded, with 2,500 people coming in front of the police station, damaging police station, demanded the arrest of the three people. And the police, the area people produced the three people there. They were remanded for 14 days. There again, the Buddhist people who went there demanded the police to show them the three people who were arrested. police has no authority to show anybody who has been taken into custody because that will affect the identification parade. So there was a big hue and cry there, and that is how it started. And then the Buddhist monk went and put another application to have a big meeting on Sunday. When we knew that this was happening, I went into Darga town. I went into Alutkam and met the senior DIG, Senanaka, the STF officials, all these people, and told that this is very bad and the situation is very tense. And they were accusing that it was a Muslim extremist group that was there. I said, there is no extremists, there is nobody, they're just ordinary civilians. If you need any more document, you can search. And please don't accuse the three boys as this, because until and unless that he is found guilty, that person is pleaded innocent. So please do not do this.
Okay.
And also give us
yeah, thanks very much. I'll just come back to you in a moment. But first, David Griffiths, what's the response of Sri Lanka's neighbours been? What's the response of the sort of regional powers been to this crisis?
Well, actually, I think we need to set this in the context of the whole international community's response to what is happening in Sri Lanka. As you're aware, the UN in March mandated the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to establish an inquiry mechanism to look into the circumstances of the end of the war and to carry out a full investigation into that and to report back to the Council. Now, one of the issues that was raised by the resolution that established that inquiry was the concerning rise of violence against Muslims and Christians in Sri Lanka. The Navi Pillay, the High Commissioner for Human Rights herself, has made a statement in which she has expressed grave concern about the violence. So the eyes of the international community are certainly on Sri Lanka, and I think it's important to stress the point that this issue is part of the wider picture of national reconciliation in Sri Lanka. It is not possible to make serious progress towards ethnic reconciliation on the one hand, while we're seeing these rising violence and discrimination against religious minorities on the other hand. What Sri Lanka needs is a national reconciliation process that involves all communities, ethnic and religious, living together harmoniously. And so it's important to see the need to address communal violence such as this as part of that wider reconciliation process.
Well, Mustafa, do you think is that a likely prospect? I mean, it is only the blink of an eye since the end of a very long, battle with the Tamils. Now we have this crisis. Are we likely to make the kind of progress that
That was the hope of everyone in Sri Lanka. In fact, even I, from UK, I went back to Sri Lanka and to work in a peripheral university. With the hope of peace and prosperity, because this reconciliation process is going on and all that. With that hope was blasted, was scattered by this emergence of this group. So, but we went there. But I should tell you something, that is, the most important thing is the general public, the Sinhalese people are so good. They're very nice people. They're not racist or extremist. It's this small, very small number of group, the very small number of people who are the extremist and racist. So they are not allowing us, even for this, during the ethnic violence, we see that, we get the reports. For the local people, they have said it's not we who have done this. It's somebody who brought this, somebody who brought outside. They have done this. So but it's very unfortunate. We were expecting a reconciliation process, but what we were given was this terror. In fact, the Muslims, they came to Geneva to support the government, and all the Muslim countries supported us, the Sri Lanka in Geneva. But we supported in Geneva, but what the government gave us was the terror monk and BBS. Very unfortunate.
Look, you know, I take the point that Mustafa's making that most Senegalese people won't be necessarily sympathetic. But I mean, we know ourselves from the far right in Europe that a determined minority can change the political culture or at least the political environment in the country. Is BBS big enough to do that?
No, well. If you even look at Hitler's Germany, you know, that's the same. I have in fact written a book on what is called the, you know, the mirage of dignity, which is already been published. In that, I always argue that it's the bystander that has to take up a position. In terms of crisis, if you take a position of neutrality, it's dangerous. You are supporting the perpetrator. So this is what exactly happening in Sri Lanka. Now, if you want to understand the influence of BBS into this one, as Dr. Rice rightly pointed out, there are certain, you know, things that are happening where the accusing finger is being, you know, pointed at the government at the moment, and also there are other conspiracy theories that are coming up. So whether the Bodubala Sena or the other hate groups are being used as pawns, right, depending on who is responsible for this, where there are some conspiracy theories like some you know, the opposition groups are accusing the government of, you know, colluding with the public, or they're using them as a tool for political reasons. The other ones are being pointed out, even Norway, for example, right after the, you know, the end of the Tamil Tigers War, there was this, you know, Norway who was doing what is called an honest broker role, which was, you know, totally, you know, bit, you know, the Sri Lankan people did not take it very, you know, in a nice way. So that is another one. Another one is the BBS has been increasingly having a lot of contacts with Viratu in Burma. Now he in fact visited recently Burma, and there appears to have signed certain agreements.
Well, there's an even more violent reaction.
Yes. So which means, and even Israel is being one of the, you know, town. So this is a lot of conspiracy theories are being tented out. So unless, you know, the government, as the representative from the Amnesty International was pointing out, if the government is supposed to do impartial inquiry, this all will come out, who is responsible. But unfortunately, will government, you know, have an impartial inquiry? This is the question.
I'm going to have to stop you there because we've come to the end of the first part, but we'll be looking at precisely those issues and trying to get behind some of the complexities that we've just been talking about there in the second half of the programme. So do rejoin us after the break.